Irina Demina was one of the choreographers invited to the program, and recently she visited Korea again, this time with a residency at the Seoul Dance Center. And I mentioned that because she is joining us here in the studio right now for this week's Touch Base in Seoul, talk about her career, her upcoming performances. Irina Demina, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting. It's a big pleasure and honor to be here.
As I mentioned, it's your second time doing the art residency program here in Korea. I understand you're mainly based in Berlin, Germany. So I guess the question for a lot of people would be, why Korea? What brought you the first time, and what allowed you to come again?
Correct. It's my second time in Korea. The first time was exactly 1 year ago. And it's funny that it was also for 6 weeks for the same duration and kind of in the same time frame. It was end of October, but in different cities and completely different programs. Last year it was the exchange program in Pyeongchang, deep in the mountains. And this year I'm a resident artist of Seoul Dance Center. I started to make a joke because last year we were mainly in Pyeongchang, and for the last performances we came back to Seoul. And I celebrated my birthday in Seoul, end of October. This year I arrived and I celebrated my birthday in Seoul, end of October. So I started to make a joke. It seems to be a nice tradition, new tradition to celebrate.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
So far I like it. I think it's a nice tradition. Would love to continue to celebrate my birthday in Seoul.
Well, obviously, everyone wants to celebrate their birthdays, probably with loved ones, maybe at home. You've been able to do it twice here in Korea, and so I think we here appreciate that. Can we learn more about you as far as your career? You grew up in Moscow. You were involved in dance from a very young age. I know that there is a very strong and prestigious and illustrious tradition of dance in Russia. Well, what was your personal story of kind of beginning this journey into your career?
I think beginning the journey is pretty typical for Russian professional dancers when we are 5 or 6 and parents are bringing their kids to different activities to test out. And I started with skating. And I was quite good in skating with one exception. When I was falling down, I refused to stand up. And that's kind of a problem in skating. So my mother brought me to a dance class, to ballet class, where kind of the possibility of falling down is considerably lower.
Right.
And I liked it. And that's how the journey started. And when I was 6 or 7, we went to the performance of the folk dance company. I fell in love. I asked my mom to sign me up for dance school. So I started as a folk dancer. And then the journey with lots of curves was happening. So it was not straightforward. I was stopping dancing. I was studying literature, so it brought me to a completely different world.
Right.
That I don't regret for a second. I think these two worlds kind of merged and enriched each other.
Yeah. So it's such a variety of different backgrounds, from something that's maybe considered a little bit more athletic, like figure skating, a kind of a sport, and then the classical training in ballet and leading you to folk dance, and then your studies of literature. So it kind of brings this sort of rich experience together for what you're doing right now. A lot of people would be wondering about your opinions in terms of here in Korea. There is a tradition of dance. There's folk dance as well. There's, of course, Korea trying to be more and more prominent in classical dance like ballet. Obviously not the same tradition as someone from Moscow, but in your experience in Moscow and Berlin, how would you compare the dance cultures with Korea?
Unfortunately, I don't have much connection to the Russian dance scene in the last 10 years that I'm living and working abroad.
Okay.
But I would say that Russian dance scene and Korean dance scene have some similarities, and exactly because, as you mentioned, they have this strong tradition of academic arts. Yeah, it's either ballet or Korean traditional dance.
Right.
And of course, for experimental dancing or contemporary forms of dance, it's on the one hand harder to compete with the monster of academic tradition. But on the other side, I find it extremely fruitful when on the soil of tradition, something new is growing. And I think it gives a unique flavor. And this flavor I can definitely see in Korean contemporary dance scene. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of performances to kind of generalize and make my judgmental opinion. Yeah, but from what I've seen so far, I can definitely see this unique flavor, passion, extreme commitment of makers in contemporary dance scene, and unique humor that I love. Humor plays a big role for my artistic work as well. And it's growing, I should say. I mean, such venues as Seoul Dance Center, that is pretty new, and it's a fantastic venue for all the dancers. I highly recommend to check it out. Has various activities for local artists, inviting international artists to give workshops, to present their work. So I'm sure that the dancing will be glowing and growing, and I'm super looking forward to see how the Korean dancing develops and ripens.
Well, when you talk about your initial experience here, which was the Deep in the Mountains program, you were part of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. A lot of people look at the Olympics as this gathering of great athletes. And of course, this time around, there was a big storyline with North Korea and South Korea, perhaps starting this peace process. But for you, do you feel that that was also a wonderful experience for you personally, as well as maybe for the dance community here in Korea to kind of have more exposure to it and interacting with all these artists like you from all around the world?
It was, I would say, one of the most intense residency programs, if not one of the most intense ones in my life. Intense in all aspects, artistically, personally, socially, culturally. The general idea was to gather 20 artists, international artists from the whole world, literally whole world, starting from Brazil, States, Japan, Israel, Korea, of course. And for 45 days, we were supposed to work together and to live together in a small village next to Pyeongchang. It felt like a reality show.
Yeah.
And then we developed, there was 3 disciplines, visual arts, music, and dance. We had to develop short performances for the final presentation and visual artist exhibition that was performed in Seoul. As I said, it was extremely intense in all senses. I think it was also the first time I was in Korea, and I think this love story with this country began kind of slowly and softly. I was still in the program, curated program, in a safe environment. This time I'm on my own, exploring Seoul, falling in love with this country, like seriously.
Well, so when you had your first experience and you say it was so intense, but obviously people here liked you. They were really respectful of what you were accomplishing. And you yourself also, I suppose, had enough of a positive experience that you came again now for the second residency, which I want to get you to talk about a little bit. You've taken part in some of these workshops. You're going to be performing your work, Act 2. Apparently, this is based on the very famous ballet Giselle. Can you talk about what you are planning right now and maybe what our listeners, if they want to attend, what they can look forward to?
Yes, this time I'm a resident artist in Seoul Dance Center. And in frames of the residency, I was teaching a dance workshop, 5 days dance workshop. I'm facilitating the feedback lab. And I'm performing the piece Second Act that is based on it's like, not based, it's better to say it's a solo remake of the iconic dance piece, ballet piece Giselle. Apparently it has some personal relation to me and the questions of identity, where I'm living, where I was born, where I'm working, who am I in the end. And I was fascinated by the story used in the second act of ballet Giselle. When Giselle dies, she finds herself in the world of villas, and it's a legend, pagan mythology, about female dancing spirits. The young girls who died before getting married as virgins, they revenge in the afterlife, they meet as ghosts, men, and dance them to death. That's the story. I was like, wow. It has, it's quite a horror story. It's a fairy tale. It has this awkward grace and elegance in it. It has a relation to dance landscape. It has it's obviously quite a feminist story, addresses topics of gender equality, of social realities. It was like a pot where many things started to fall into. So I started to dig into this hole, and it was the time when I was in Korea, actually, this whole story started to grow.
Wow.
Last year in Pyeongchang.
And really, from that age-old story, so relevant today with everything we've talked about with the Me Too movement and questions about how to address issues of gender equality. I think a lot of people definitely look forward to your work during this current residency. The question then going forward is, you mentioned you spent 2 birthdays here in Korea for the past 2 years. I'm going to bet that perhaps it's not as likely that you'll spend the third straight birthday in Korea. Never say never.
No,
but
never say never.
With that uncertain future in mind, what do you foresee? And do you feel that perhaps even in the future there will be this continuous connection with Korea, with your career?
I hope so. I really hope so. And as you said, you never know. Yeah, the life of contemporary dance makers. Yeah, it's more project based, so it's hard to predict for
Sure.
a long time. But I really hope so. I'm really excited and fascinated by Korean culture and by the dance scene, and I hope I can contribute and bring some of my knowledge and experiences and thoughts to it. I mean, as I've said, my life path and dance path was not straightforward, and still in the time when I was not dancing and I was coming back asking myself why I'm dancing for 32 years, I think it just keeps on fascinating me. Dance as an art form, it's an art form that allows to connect people to each other on a different level, to tune people into themselves, to tell stories that words cannot tell. And maybe even, I mean, dance is an art form. It speaks to imagination, to creativity. It's more abstract. It doesn't give dogmas or clear messages. It more
Right.
opens up the reflection space. And I think that's what we need nowadays. We don't need more ideologies or dogmas. We need more open spaces for encounters, for reflections that provoke people to
Right.
think and to feel.
Yeah, excellent points indeed. I think we will look forward to your great work here in Korea, as well as for the rest of your career going forward. We want to thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure it's a busy time, but we hope that we can see you again very shortly here in these studios. And until then, best of luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you.